And we are live. It's Dr. J in the house with Rob Edwards. Today, we're going to be talking about all things perimenopause, mood, fatigue, irregular periods, potentially hot flashes, all those good symptoms that most women want to avoid, right? We want to get to the root cause of why this is happening. So whether it's PMS or perimenopause, or maybe you're getting close to menopause, we're going to dive into the root cause of this physiology and what you can do. My man, Rob, how are we doing, brother?
Good. It's been a long time. It's been a couple
Yes.
months anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we got to connect a little bit before kind of talk about some of this stuff, which is great.
Yes.
Of course, ourselves being in our 40s, and there's people in our own lives that are in their 40s that deal with some of this perimenopausal, menopausal stuff. If it's on the early end, I mean, typically,
Mhm.
a lot of people say in their 50s. But yeah, I'm excited to dive back into this topic again and get things rolling here.
Absolutely. So, big symptoms we're going to see are fatigue, mood swings, irregular periods. Sometimes you can also see hot flashes, weight gain's a big one, sleep disturbances. So, these are all on the table as issues, right? So, first off, let's kind of define terms. I think it's good to do that. So, perimenopause, peri means around, right? It means around menopause. And so, let's just start with menopause. Menopause typically starts somewhere between 48 and 51, where that's average, right? I see women with their hormones beaten up and they're dealing with this in their 30s. Or you can
Mhm.
just have a surgery, hysterectomy, and be in it right away surgically, right? But so the average is 48, 51, but this can happen earlier because there's so much hormonal stressors in our environment. And so when you don't have a cycle period for 12 consecutive cycles, now you're technically, menopause. You're in menopause, right? And usually that menopausal time frame of symptoms can last anywhere between 5 to 10 years, where you're having more hot flashes, low libido, vaginal dryness, hair
Mhm.
issues, skin elasticity issues. And these can all happen when you're perimenopausal too. The difference is you're still having a monthly cycle. So menopause, no cycle for 12 different cycles, 12 months. Perimenopause, you're starting to have a lot of menopausal symptoms that I mentioned, but you're still having a cycle. And the cycle symptoms are happening randomly throughout the entire cycle. Or if we go to women who are PMS, how is that different? Because PMS can still overlap. You can still have irregular periods. You can still have bloating, mood issues, depression, anxiety, irritability, water retention. Typically, PMS is going to be more in that 7 to 10 window day before you actually menstruate. So think about it like day 20 to 28 or so is where you're going to see the big hormonal symptoms, where perimenopause, you're starting to get older and then it starts to happen randomly throughout the entire month. But there's some overlap there. It can be a little bit confusing. So I like to really lay it out. And then we'll test these hormones. We'll look at estradiol on day 2 or 3. We'll look at progesterone in the heart of the luteal phase on day 20. We'll look at DHEA sulfate. We'll take a look at FSH and LH if we need. These are our pituitary brain hormones. These start to go higher as we get closer to menopause, because it's the pituitary screaming to the ovaries, make more hormone, make more hormone. So it starts to get higher and higher and higher. And that's part of what drives some of the hot flashes, is that FSH can create some flushing and that increase in body temp. And so it's good to look at those too, because that can give you a clue of how close into menopause you are. And so these are all important things to look at, from a hormonal standpoint, just on the testing. But I'll let you go.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think kind of like touching back on the stressors, right? That's really a big deal. Women tend to lose their resiliency, right? More difficult to deal with stress.
Mhm.
Kind of crazy mom starting to come out, and they recognize it, they notice it. And I think for a lot of people, when they get into like the perimenopause stage, they are noticing big shifts. Heavy bleeding, irregular bleeding, the brain fog, constipation, irritability, and it really starts to affect their life, both I think from a personal perspective with their husband or their spouse, and then also downstream with their kids. And so a lot of people that I see, that's one of their biggest complaints is they're not who they quote unquote used to be. So that's a big thing, I think.
And if you go read Dr. Jonathan Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, he talks about cortisol in women and cortisol in men. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It impacts the frontal cortex, ruminating thoughts, dealing with stress. The biggest buffer on stress that men have is testosterone. Testosterone can help buffer stress in men. And that's why when a man deals with an emotional stressor, if that testosterone's there, it can create a buffer in how that frontal cortex processes it. It's easier, I think, to compartmentalize it. When that testosterone kind of drops, it's easier to more ruminate. And we have lots of guys with lower testosterone today because of the estrogen in our environment, the plastics, the pesticides, the chemicals, the glyphosate, the mold. And so even though we're talking about women here, men can still be impacted by the same hormonal physiology that women have too. So
Mhm.
it's not like an either or here. Plus, with men, if they eat lots of excess carbohydrate, processed food, they upregulate an enzyme called aromatase, which causes more estrogen in them. And so men can still have these same issues. So it's not just a female thing. But getting back to that, why is that an issue with stress? Because when a woman goes closer into perimenopause, that testosterone drops. So if they had more testosterone, let's say in their 20s and 30s, now that testosterone is dropping, now the stress is going to impact their brain, how they feel, how they respond, their resiliency. So it can intensify it. And part of the things that keep testosterone and this also estrogen too up as we get closer to perimenopause, and I always say it like I'm in that state, but it's just me being in that first person. Um, the thing that helps that is DHEA sulfate. DHEA is that precursor sex hormone building block for our sex hormones. And that can also multitask towards estrogen, and it can also multitask towards testosterone. So the same physiology that helps men with the T, we can still support that with women as well. And people don't realize it when I say, hey, think of a woman's most predominant hormone. Like, what hormone does a woman make the most of? Just say it right now. What's your guess?
I mean, well, it depends what we're talking about. We're talking about upstream pregnenolone,
No,
but
no, but just downstream. Yeah. Go ahead.
estrogen. Yeah, estrogen would
Yeah,
be the
right.
top.
But it's
Yeah,
actually no. Testosterone is 2 to 3x more than any other female hormone.
yeah.
The only exception is like progesterone for a few days in ovulation. But outside of that, average throughout the month, it's testosterone. People don't know that. They're like, what? Like testosterone's like a guy thing. It's like, well, it's the most predominant hormone in women. And
Yeah.
so DHEA plays an important role for that in women. And so the more stressed we are, testosterone will drop, and then also estrogen will drop too. So when it comes to mood, hormones are a big part of it. This is why men are different in regards to dealing with stress and dealing with mood. And so we got to look at that. And so the more balanced we are with our hormones, the more resilient we become. This is about being resilient.
Yeah, I think kind of just to hit on that cortisol DHEA relationship. So yeah, if cortisol, high stress environment, high stress capacity to deal with things, if we're at a high level, we're not going to have as much DHEA production, which is sort of our rest and
Mm-hmm.
repair hormone, and we'll be able to create more of the estrogen and estrogenic balances and things of that nature.
Correct.
And then just to hit a little bit on that progesterone that goes into that steel, right? Is that the progesterone steel that it can convert
Yep.
itself into cortisol if it's a high stress environment. So your hormones get
Mm-hmm.
all out of whack if we're high stress, high strung on top of the perimenopause, which is going to create stress inside of the body anyhow. But if we've got all these other external factors of stressors in our life or infections in our body or other things that are putting our body into that stress state or cortisol dominance, our hormones are always going to be affected by that.
Correct. And also, women have habits from their 20s and 30s of what they can eat, what they can do activity wise. And then they start to hit their 40s, they start to gain weight. It's like, why? It's like, well, as we go into perimenopause and those hormones drop, one of the biggest correlations we see is we become more insulin resistant. So the carbohydrate threshold that we had, the amount of carbs or processed food or alcohol that we could do 20s or 30s, or the amount of exercise we needed, all those things now change. It's a moving bullseye. Like my wife, for instance, had put on a little bit of weight, and she's in that perimenopausal time frame, and we tweaked her macros in the last couple of weeks, got her carbs down, got the protein and fat up, just tweaked her exercise a little bit, and she's lost over 10 pounds in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
I told you, I'm like, you're just going a little bit more insulin resistant, and you just have to adjust things. What you could do a decade ago, you can't quite. You can still get similar results. We just got to tweak it a little bit, and it worked. And so I see that a lot. And so one of the bigger things that we see with perimenopausal women is insulin resistance. And so I like to always
Mhm.
have an
Yeah.
objective tool. My blood sugar meter is great. So a functional glucose tolerance, test your blood sugar before you eat on fasting. 1 hour, 2 hours later, we want to be below 100 in hour 2. If you're still above 100 in hour 2, test it in hour 3. But that's a good way to start looking at blood sugar issues. And you could also have good blood sugar, but if you're bouncing around too and you're reactive hypoglycemic, that could also contribute more to the mood stuff, the irritability, the heart stuff, maybe sleep stuff. So it can create a lot of mood issues too if your blood sugar is not stable. It could be good levels, but it could be bouncing around a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Justin, because we create these sort of patterns in our life and these things that we get used to doing. And then as we get older and or we get more oxidative stress on the cells, we start to get more stressed in general. We have more kids, we have more different kind of things. We've got to adjust some things, our macros, our micros, make sure that we got enough minerals and things like that coming into our body. But yeah, I know you're kind of breaking out that tool, it looks like. I
Yep.
think that's sort of an underrated tool. If you're post 40, it's going to be a big benefit to learn about your blood sugar, how your body responds to, these different things. And so he's doing some ninja stuff over there, and we're going to look and see where he's at.
Let's see. I want to be below 100. Getting ready to eat. Come on, baby. Below 100. 94.
Nice.
I passed.
It.
Yeah, you know I'm not chugging Coca-Cola here in the background. My blood sugar will be sky high.
Yeah, was that the Keto Mojo?
Yeah, Keto Mojo is great because it connects to your phone and then it graphs it all out, so you can create a little graph and look at it later. So if you forget, it'll say, "Oh, you took it at this date, this time," and then you can do 2 or 3 in a row, and then you can see that graph, which is nice.
Yeah, that's great.
And I know a lot of women may be listening and saying, "Well, like men are so lucky they don't have this issue." It's like, well, if you're thinking that, I see so many men today, we test their hormones, they're in the tank, like 60, 70-year-old testosterone. It's so bad. Yep. And part of this is both sexes are impacted by the milieu of hormones that we swim in. And so it negatively impacts everyone. Women have this monthly cycle. So the analogy I've always given is women's hormones are like a beautiful orchestra. And all it takes is the horns of the strings to be off, and that music can sound like noise pretty fast. Men's hormones are like, it's like playing one single note, like you got your like E, right? Like I call it the foghorn, right? So it's it's kind of easy. It's not as it's
a little more straightforward.
Yeah, it's not quite as concerted. It's not quite as detailed, right? And so because of that, when the things start to go awry a little bit, we can have problems. They become a lot more noticeable. And so it's there. And so I tell people that. Why? Because if we don't talk about the environment that we're in and how much of an input on our hormones that is, it impacts all of us. And we got moms that have husbands and kids and all this. And plus, if you're still wanting to get pregnant, these are factors you have to be aware of. And if you want to sail into perimenopause and menopause, we have to make sure our water's clean filtered water, no microplastics. Don't be storing your water in plastics. I mean, if you're just drinking out of it, you're putting water in a plastic thing and you're drinking, not a big deal. It's when you're putting it in for hours upon hours, it's heat, it's going outside. That's where you want a stainless steel bottle. But if you're in your house and you're just getting a plastic, that's not a big deal. It's just, that's fast, right? Or especially if the water's like room temp, not a big deal. But in general, get used to glass, get used to stainless steel. Make sure your food's more organic. Make sure you're getting good proteins and good fats and good cholesterol, because that's the building block of your hormones, right? If you want good hormones and your hormones are being depleted, I need to put this addition onto my home. I need to have enough drywall, lumber, concrete. If there's a deficit there, I can't put that addition on. Same thing with your hormones. So we have to make sure that raw material that we need to make those hormones is there. But not only is it there, can we digest it? Can we assimilate it? Can we break it down? Can we absorb it? All those things are so important.
Yes, there's sort of like, on the one side, when we talk about like environmental toxins affecting sort of like endocrine, right? Endocrine disruptors, particular phthalates, plastics, these kind of things.
Yes.
That's going to create a block. It's going to create hormonal disruption within the body. And I think that's what we're trying to say. So you're going to see it in both men and women, not just one side, even though they affect them differently. And then when we talk about gut and gut absorption, there's also disruptors there too, right? Which could be mold or dysbiosis and things like that can happen in the side of the gut that's keeping you from absorbing the things that you are eating. But in the first place, I always tell people, I'm like, here's the thing though, like one of the things that your cell does is it absorbs the nutrients in your gut. Your epithelial cells absorbs nutrients, but if there's no presence of those nutrients, there's not a whole lot it can do other than rob Peter to pay Paul. It's got to start eating itself if you're not eating it.
And if we consume lots of glucose and excess carbohydrate, those foods have an expensive transaction fee. It takes magnesium, it takes B vitamins, it takes ALA, it takes amino acids to process excess carbohydrate. The more processed it is, high fructose corn syrup, added sugar, the more expensive it is to take those nutrients in. It'll take more nutrients out of us to process it than we get from the food. And that's what we call nutrient debt, right? That's nutrient prison right there. You never get out.
Yeah, and that sort of like goes into like whenever I talk to people about weight gain, that weight gain is a metabolic dysfunction, right? It's sort of like your body's putting away excess materials. Not that if we gain weight, that can be a healthy thing too. But when we're getting kind of more in the obese state, that's a metabolic dysfunction, right? It's a metabolic
Correct.
dysfunction. We have too much glucose. We have too much, too much of the stuff that we're eating is being converted and made into fat and stored up in our cells. And then
Correct.
likewise, to double compound that issue, fat is also where our toxins like the story, or at least many of them. And so then your body even has a harder time of wanting to release those, the fat.
Correct. Correct. And that's part of just the insulin resistance. And also, our body doesn't want toxins flowing around. So, if we don't have the detox nutrients there, we'll trap away some of these toxins, right? That's why we want to make sure we have the good sulfur and all those powerful antioxidants. So, all that makes sense. So, in general, big mechanisms, big biochemistry behind these symptoms, right? Estrogen dominance is one. That could be more estrogen relative to progesterone, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have high estrogen. So just don't confuse that. High estrogen, yes. My last patient had high estrogen and she had middle to low progesterone, right? But you could also have lower estrogen and then just lower progesterone relative to that, and you could still be estrogen dominant. So that's more of a ratio thing. Low DHEA and low testosterone can be a thing. Cortisol imbalances, either overly high, overly low. Cortisol also mobilizes sugar, right? So you can be stressed. You could be making a whole bunch of glucose because of that cortisol. You're mobilizing it from the muscle, from the tissue, from breaking down amino acids. And you could be mobilizing a candy bar worth of glucose, even though you're not eating the candy bar, right? So this is why stress stinks, is it's like you ate the candy bar, it's flowing through your bloodstream, but you didn't get the enjoyment of actually eating the candy bar, right? So it kind of stinks, but you're dealing with the side effects of it. So that's why like walking and some movement and exercise can be helpful, especially when you're stressed, because it cleans up the extra glucose that your body spills over when you get stressed.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more component there. Then we have neurotransmitter changes. So when we get stressed, we convert dopamine to adrenaline. Dopamine is an important feel-good neurotransmitter, connection, focus. And so when we start to have this brain feeling, inability to focus, brain fog, part of it can be that stress driving dopamine down to adrenaline. Just like you mentioned earlier, progesterone goes to cortisol. Well, on the neurotransmitter side, dopamine can go to adrenaline.
Yeah, and I think kind of a big takeaway as a whole is really the conversation around homeostasis, or balance in the body. So what we're talking about essentially is different ways that your body can get imbalanced, right? Whether it's excess carbs or it's excess toxins or it's excess whatever it happens to be. And that's what we look at within people, right? So the reason we do testing is to kind of figure out where are there imbalances in the body, where is the body unable to create homeostasis, and where are the potentials, hidden potentials that hormones are being affected, neurotransmitters are being affected, and all these other kind of things that we're talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, I think everything affects everything. Like our body doesn't exist in a single straight line. So it's when cortisol is high, you are going to have sex hormone issues, right? You're going to have DHEA issues. Like that's going to happen. You're going to have stealing happens. You're going to have more free radical production or reactive oxygen species.
And the issue is more chronic because everyone's going to have stress. It's the chronicity of it that creates these problems.
Yeah, and the accumulation. So chronicity and accumulation, because some toxins have half-lives that are longer, and you just start accumulating, and we start showing problems there. So yeah.
So let's talk about some more hidden clues, right? Fatigue's a big one. Now, again, this is where it gets, in female world, it gets really tough because I see lots of women with these same issues who don't have perimenopause. This is where it gets so tough, right? And so you have the right, you could have PMS and overlap with perimenopause, right? The solution a lot of times is going to be very similar. The difference is if you're up against not having a cycle, then things start to change a little bit. This is where the art and the science of what we do kind of collide, right? And women's hormones can be so intricate, you really got to look at the pattern. But fatigue's a big one. Now, why are we fatigued? We're fatigued because of these cortisol imbalances, because of blood sugar. Also, if we have, let's say, dysmenorrhea, and we're estrogen dominant and we have a lot of blood flow, like a patient we were talking about earlier, we can be anemic. And when we have low iron, now we don't have the ability to generate aerobic energy well. Electron transport chain and generating ATP is now lower. So energy is in a drop, right? You do go back to the science experiment in middle school where you take the candle, you put a glass jar over it. What happens to the candle? The light, it goes out. Why? Because that candle needs oxygen for metabolism, for heat, for energy. Same thing metabolically inside of us. We have the mood swings because of the progesterone, because of the dopamine, because of the cortisol. We have anxiety issues because progesterone also is a GABA chloride channel opener. Progesterone drop, less GABA in the brain. GABA is a inhibitory neurotransmitter. So if you find yourself excessively ruminating, not being able to turn off your stress, your husband gets over the stress, but you're just still on it, right? That's GABA. That's progesterone, right? That's glutamate in the brain. All right. So there's reasons why this happens. Irregular periods, like I mentioned, the estrogen dominance, you're going to lose the iron that way. And then, of course, that can cause sleep issues. You're not able to wind down. Maybe you're waking up and such. Maybe you're waking up to pee a lot because the hormones are creating elasticity issues with the bladder and some of those muscles that help micturition and empty the bladder. And then, of course, like breast tenderness is going to be a big one. Maybe you have fibrocystic tissue there, headaches, bloating, maybe migraines, right? You could still have some PMS issues where that time frame right before you bleed, you're going to have some of those PMS symptoms. All the things I mentioned all come up in that couple of days before you menstruate. All those are things to look out for that may tell you there's some perimenopausal stuff. And of course, the biggest thing is just your age, but women in your 30s, you're still not immune. And even women in their 20s, I see levels that are just so low, it's just shocking.
Yeah, we definitely see some hormone related issues at very, very young ages, in particular thyroid, even though that's not this
Correct.
topic, but it's still a hormone, right? It's affected by all the other hormones.
Correct.
And I typically see, and I'm sure it's the same with you see a progression. There's a progression, the thyroid issues, there's the insulin resistance issue, there's sex hormone issues. Not uncommon for me to see people that have hysterectomies at early ages, and it's in their 30s, and you ask them why, and they say, well, because I had fibroids, or I had endometriosis, or I had an overgrowth, or I had bleeding that wouldn't stop. And so the answer was a hysterectomy, when in the reality, the hormones, it's always sad to me because the hormones can actually be fixed. Like we can actually work on the body. In many cases, we can fix these things. So
yes, we can.
But yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Go ahead. You keep going.
I was just saying there's a hormonal cascade to this whole thing. And your primary ones, if you're cortisol dominant, cortisol is going to be dominant. You're going to have a dominant issue with insulin sensitivity, most likely for most people, which gets into energy production. Because again, if we can't get insulin inside of that cell, we're not using glucose to produce energy inside that cell. And the weight gain, what I see with like T3, which tells the cells to let go of fat, right? We start having issues with weight loss issues, like in other words, difficult for women to lose weight.
Yeah. Well, interesting study here too. The importance of nutrition in menopause and perimenopause. So interesting study here. This is the journal Nutrients, December 2023. And they talk about certain nutrients that get depleted in perimenopause. So, making sure hydrated, make sure we have good electrolytes, making sure vitamin D, calcium, vitamin C, B vitamins, making sure protein intake is up. And women get very concerned about osteoporosis, but if I just, tell you, think of the number one nutrient connected to osteoporosis. What is it, Rob?
You're talking about protein?
Well, just the average person. If I say, hey,
calcium.
Calcium. People think calcium, right? It's like if I say potassium, you say
sodium.
Well,
you mean calcium. Calcium. Yes. Sorry.
Well, yeah. So like there's certain things, right? If I say bones, you're going to say, oh, it's calcium. If I say potassium, you think banana, right?
Yeah, banana.
But there's a lot of there's a lot of preconceived conceptions. But in general, like potassium, for instance, avocados have twice the amount of potassium than bananas do, but bananas get thought of. We talk about bones. One of the most important thing in your bone that makes up the raw material is protein, right? But we don't think of protein with bones. We think of calcium. We think of milk, right? It's a lot of that kind of brainwashing from years of TV commercials, right?
Industry trying to sell milk.
Exactly. So protein, big deal. And if you're on an acid blocker as well, oh my gosh, you're set up for failure. So we have to have good digestion. We have to have good protein. And then, of course, look right here. Lifestyle factors, type 2 diabetes. And again, just because you're not going and getting tested and coming back with diabetes does not mean your blood sugar is okay. Many conventional docs will say, oh, your blood sugar is fine. It may not be. A lot of the testing that we use for hormones are going to be what's called a functional range. So lab ranges typically work for conventional MDs. It's a 2 standard deviation to the left and to the right of the mean. So that means the average, 2 standard deviations left and right is about a 95th percentile, fits in this what's called the bell curve. That's a lot. As people get sicker, what happens to the bell curve? It gets wider and wider and wider, and more people get stuck in it. You go to the airport, 95% of people aren't healthy or aren't normal, right? There's typical and there's normal. Most doctors confuse typical with normal.
Yep.
So that's why we kind of use that first standard deviation, so that maybe middle 50%. That's a more optimal range. And so we'll look at things in a more sensitive way. Kind of like I gave you an example with the functional glucose tolerance. We're never going to say, oh, let's take this test 12 to 16 hours after you eat in the morning and see where your blood sugar's at. That will never, you'd have to be sick for a decade for that to show a problem.
Yeah.
So we do this because it'll show it much faster, and we'll see improvement faster too. So those are some big nutrients that are important. And I love the protein part. I love the blood sugar stuff. All very important things.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Justin, I mean, that's one of the benefits of technology, right? Is like we can do this stuff in our home, right? So the reason you go to the doctor's office, you go in to take blood draws or things like that, you can't do that like every 4 hours. You can't do that like
Correct.
2 hours after you eat. Like that's just not feasible. But getting a Keto Mojo, you eat something, you can see shortly thereafter, what did that do to my blood sugar? And now you know that's a more functional approach. That's something that knows more functionally what your body's doing versus I'm going to fast overnight, then I'm going to take a blood glucose and see what happens. There's so many variabilities that can get that wrong.
Plus, going for a big needle draw, that's a stress response right there. That creates cortisol, adrenaline, that
Yep.
increases the blood sugar right there. The little finger prick isn't as bad.
Yeah, 100%. And that's sort of the glycolysis in the liver, right? So it's sort of like cortisol is asking for more glucose to deal with the issue at hand. So yeah, it's
I want to
ahead.
highlight this right here. Look at this. The specific hormones involved in perimenopausal mood changes are numerous. Recent investigations have suggested the influence of cortisol and the HPA adrenal axis. We talk about this all the time in functional medicine, right? That's the brain feedback loop. Inflammation, testosterone, and the hormone influences of estrogen and progesterone. Come on, it's like we've actually been at the library, Rob, like studying this stuff, right? It's like this is what we actually do.
And then the most important thing on there is it says, which has been extensively studied. So people that always ask, well, where do I find this information? It's like literally go, PubMed, Google, wherever you're going to find this. This isn't like new information in terms of that.
And it talks about the estrogen decline right here. It talks about how that can create some of these mood issues. Right. And then it talks about, some of the other things here. We're trying to take a lot of this information and distill it into what's actually actionable. Because there's a lot of scientific jargon here that doesn't really equate to like, hey, I just got to maybe eat organic or work on my digestion or take some nutrients that have some of these additional Bs or work on my gut. So there's a lot of things. And again, when we talk to patients and we work with them, we make a list and we look at things and we individualize it because everyone's priorities may be a little bit different. So it's going to be customized. We're just giving you general stuff, but when we work with patients, it's going to get very nitty gritty into the specifics.
Yeah, 100%. That's where you can get into specifics in terms of like what specific kinds of stressors are affecting the body, what specific kind of things, the body's doing with detox pathways and all those different kind of things like liver, phase 1, phase 2. We can look at a lot more things that's more nuanced to your point, Justin, for somebody that's coming in because but the biggest thing to your point, I think you're kind of hitting on that is going to be lifestyle. Right. Lifestyle is going to be 70, 80% of this. I think sometimes supplementation therapeutically is needed to get somebody out of a hole because you're in a hole so far. It's absolutely needed, I think, for some people because you've got to, it's sort of like if you dislocate your arm or something, eventually you got to go to PT and you're going to circle your arm more than you ever have before because we're therapeutically working on things that happens inside of our body too when somebody comes to us with all these signs and all these symptoms and cortisol dominance and I'm in perimenopause and I'm destroying my family because I'm erratic crazy lady and I can't remember my keys every single day, all those things.
And look right here, it talks about some of the functional neuroanatomy. It talks about the menopausal transition may activate different parts of the brain, the ventral limbic regions, the medial temporal zone, and that may influence negative emotional information, right? And so this is important. Also, it talks about the drop in estrogen. This is talking about a mice study that furthermore, overrectomized mice have been found to increase serotonin production after estradiol administration. So what they're saying is when they drop the estrogen, their serotonin goes down, and that can have a major impact on major depressive disorders too. So it's important. Hormones have an impact on your mood, on your brain. The neuroanatomy changes based on how these hormones are fluctuating. And so it's important, right? Yeah. It just means, for my women who are listening to this, it just means what you're feeling is not an opinion. It's real. It's connected by your hormones. It's connected by neurotransmitters. And so we want to get to the bottom of it because you can feel better, right? This is not just random stuff. It's not all in your head.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder what your take is on like hormone replacement therapy, because I know for a lot of people, even in the functional medicine community, we're just seeing people going straight to that. Let's replace hormones. Let's replace hormones. Let's replace hormones. And a lot of people that I'm seeing are like they're in a worse place sometimes than where they first started, because
Correct.
there's other things there's other reasons your hormones are out of whack. There's
Yeah.
other things going on.
Well, I mean, I see it a lot. And again, in the female community, it's there. I see it a lot in the male community where it's like,
Mhm.
you got a guy, he's got low T, he's in his 30s or 40s. He's drinking out of plastics. His aromatase is through the roof because his insulin's high.
Mhm.
Maybe he's consuming soy. Maybe he's not even lifting weights. Maybe his sleep's not dialed in. And you're going to go dump 100, 150 milligrams of testosterone on this guy a week. Like that is just not smart because you're not fixing the underlying root cause of why that T is low. And maybe when you fix it, maybe, just maybe, the testosterone comes back up and most of his symptoms go away. But let's say they don't. Well, now you're at least working on a cleaner canvas. You don't have all these other underlying physiological imbalances in the background moving. It's like working on a computer that's full of viruses. Well, let's get the viruses all cleaned up and defragged, and then let's install the software, right?
Mhm.
But I find most of the time, you don't even need the extra T. Now, with women, it's different because you have a follicle reserve, right? Your ovaries are full of all the follicles. You have all the potential babies or follicles are all there at birth. It's kind of crazy. I saw like it's like it's a picture of a woman, and then you see the baby inside of that woman, and just knowing that that baby has all the follicles in it. So all of the future
It's crazy.
potential grandbabies are already in that woman inside that baby. It's just crazy. It's like, whoa, it's nuts.
Mind boggling.
It's mind boggling to think like that. It's like, that's maybe like 60, 70 years down the road there. It's crazy. So when those follicles start to run out, the LH and the estradiol that's being produced by those follicles drops. And
Mhm.
so that's a big thing. And so there may need to be estriol or estradiol into menopause. In perimenopause, we typically use more DHEA. We typically use more progesterone at the right time of the cycle in that follicular phase. And we use herbs that work on the upstream FSH and LH, the brain hormones. And we work on herbs that help with the HPA axis. So we
Mhm.
do all of those things to help reset it, works on receptor sites, works on hormonal output. And we try to make sure the what's in the environment hormonally is not screwing us up. And we make sure that if things are coming in, because we live in a toxic world, that we're able to clear them out as well. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think also opening up the estrogenic pathways, in terms of being able to metabolize old estrogen and whatnot and get it outside the body as well. So liver, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3
Correct.
support to make sure that
Correct.
your body's
100%.
actually building this up. So,
100%. I think we went over symptoms. We talked about neurotransmitters. The big ones that come in here are going to be progesterone's impact on GABA,
mhm,
estrogen's impact on serotonin, how that can create depression and mood. And then, of course, GABA, the ability to kind of move on, be more resilient, kind of shut down what you're thinking about. That's going to be GABA, progesterone. And then some of the nutrient depletions. We talked about magnesium, B6, zinc, calcium, vitamin C, and then now testing. So we can do blood testing around day 2 or 3 for estradiol on the conventional medicine side. We
mhm,
can do progesterone in that luteal phase, like around day 20. We're going to definitely want to run a Dutch test and look at free and total hormones. And the Dutch looks at cortisol wonderfully, which I love. And it also looks at how we're detoxifying estrogen. So we're going to look at E1, E2, E3, right? Estrone, estradiol, estriol. And we're going to look at 2-methoxy, 2-hydroxy metabolites to see how we're clearing out our estrogens. And then we also want to be able to look at DHEA sulfate. We want to look at testosterone. We want to look at progesterone. But if someone's really in the thick of it hormonally, I want to compare blood to the Dutch as well. So I like to do both on that.
yeah, it makes sense. I think the Dutch. I mean, I really love the Dutch breakdown, especially of like the different estrogenic conversion sites for the metabolites. The 2OH,
Yep.
4OH, and 16OH. Because it kind of gives you an idea, like which are they going down the safe pathways, or are they going down more of a potential pathway that you
Correct.
don't want them to go down?
And you got 2, 4, 16, 2. We want 2, 2, too much 2. We want more 2. 4 and 16 tends to create DNA damage, oxidative stress, not good. 4 and 16. Things that cause more 2 are going to be B vitamins, folate, choline, N-acetylcysteine, a lot of your proteins, a lot of your B vitamins, a lot of your antioxidants. And so if you have good nutrients there, DIM, diindol methane,
Yep.
indole 3-carbidol, calcium glutarate, that's going to push the 2 pathway, which is more cancer protective. And then 4 and 16 are more cancer promoting, DNA damaging. And that's just the opposite, doing the opposite things go that way.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we hit that stuff. Lifestyle changes, right? Get the blood sugar in check. Good proteins, good fats. Make sure your digestion's dialed in. Be careful with alcohol and caffeine. Make sure sleep is dialed in. Look at all the toxins from the water. Are you living in a moldy environment? Mold is estrogenic, right? Look at, if you're in a moldy environment, we got to look at mold. And again, like your average doctor isn't even going to know what to do with that.
They don't
I mean,
look at all.
I had
They're not gonna
patients
look.
go over to last year to a Mayo Clinic, and once they brought up mold to Mayo Clinic, they pushed them out. Nope,
Yeah.
we don't. People will they will do this if you bring up mold. They'll pull up the garlic and the crosses. Seriously, it's one of those things, but it can be an issue, and we are equipped to talk about it and deal with it. So we talked about the liver stuff and then getting the gut dialed in. The gut is a major means of detoxification. So without good gut health, we can reabsorb a lot of toxins there. So when you think about toxins, people go liver, 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 but we also look at the gut. That's so important.
Yeah, 100%. And that's also your absorption area too. So if we've got putrefaction or overgrowth or dysbiosis in the gut, you might be eating great, you might be eating all the right foods, but if we don't address those things, then you're going to have a hard time absorbing them in the first place and create a dysbiotic environment there too.
Yes. And sometimes the thyroid can overlap when women are like, well, is it a thyroid issue? Is it this? I go, you have the right to have more than one issue going on at the same time. You could have you could have high TSH, low T3, poor T4, T3 conversion. You could have Hashimoto's antibodies in the background. You could have low DHEA sulfate. You could have a reverse cortisol rhythm, estrogen dominance with low progesterone. You could have all of those things and live in a moldy home. It's like, holy smokes, right? It gets overwhelming. I get it. But we have approaches where we look at everything, and it's like a captain that gets into a 747. They have their checklist and they go over everything because everyone's life depends on it, right? We operate the same way. We have our checklist. We make sure we don't miss anything, but thyroid can be a thing. So we're looking at TSH, T4, T3. If we have low iron, you probably have low thyroid because iron is really important for thyroid synthesis. The enzymes that make that thyroid hormone are going to rely on ferritin and selenium and glutathione. So we got to keep an eye on that. We may look at fasting insulin too, because insulin resistance junks up every single hormone pathway.
Yep.
And then again, the big things you're going to hear, you go to your conventional doctor, fatigue and mood are just brushed off as aging. You're just aging.
Get better sleep.
Here's an antidepressant, or if your cycles are still erratic, right? Here's a birth control pill, right? It's like, this is what happens. And none of that is fixing the underlying cause, right? They're basically putting it back on you. Like, it's just your issue. You got to deal with it. It's like, no, but there's actually a reason why you feel that way. Let's put our focus, instead of covering it up, on what we can actually do to fix it.
Yeah, I think I was looking at my numbers the other day, and I've talked to at least 1,000 people over the last year. I think I eclipsed that number, and just about every single time it's the same thing. I went to this doctor, went to that doctor, went to that doctor. They said take this medication and maybe get better sleep, right? And it's just kind of, they brush off actually the major components of getting your health back. So, you know, just to touch on that real quick, you know, our lifestyles compound upon each other. The way I act today, if I act that same way every single day over the next year, that's 365 days of plastic exposure, 365 days of more mold exposure, whatever that looks like, it starts to compound. But health does the same thing. If we start reducing the stressors, we start increasing the nutrient and the nutrient absorption inside of our body, we start giving the body what it needs. Then, to Justin's point, even though everything seems so complicated inside the body, it also has a way to fix itself. And it's way beyond what any doctor could explain to you exactly what it's doing. Right? When we give the body what it needs, it's going to be the smartest doctor. It knows how to heal itself. It's really removing the interferences and then giving it what it's missing.
Correct. Yep. 100%. So if you're a female listening to this, what are action items you can do? Start tracking your cycle if you haven't been, right? Get a Kandara app, a Flow, or one of the Oura rings that you can track it. You can throw a temperature testing in with it. Usually right at the start of ovulation, we have a drop in temperature followed by a 0.3 degree rise into or ending ovulation. So you can add a temperature while testing your cycle, and we can run testing. We can do all the testing I mentioned, whether it's Dutch hormone testing, whether it's blood testing, whether it's thyroid, whether we're looking at adrenal, whether we're looking at cortisol, looking at gut, looking at different nutrients, looking at toxins. These are all good things to look at. And again, everyone comes in different places, right? And so we always try to meet people where they're at so we can always do something over nothing. A couple other things here. We talked about lifestyle, right? Eat the hormonal building blocks. Don't, be this person who's worried about going low fat or avoiding animal protein. These are important building blocks that you need. Focus on healthy quality. Focus on nutrient dense, anti-inflammatory, low toxins. And then once you have that dialed, then you can get nitpicky and start adjusting your macros, maybe adjusting the carbs, eating more healthy cruciferous veggies to help with estrogen detoxification. These are all good things. At least hitting your 10,000 steps, because your steps are going to help with insulin resistance. Moving is going to help with insulin resistance. And again, you can add in interval training, you can add in lifting, you can add in yoga, Pilates. These are all other good things that you can throw in there too, but at least have a foundation of walking, because it's easy to do and it's good for you.
Yeah.
Anything
100%.
else, Rob?
I think we've covered quite a bit, and I got a patient here in about 4 minutes.
Well, there's a lot of stuff to think about. Just try to think of one thing. Once you get that, do the next. If you get overwhelmed or you're ready for that next step and you want to go into testing, feel free. You guys can reach out to Rob at heritagehealth.life, heritagehealth.life. There'll be a link right below in the description, or myself, Dr. J at justinhealth.com. We see patients worldwide. We look at hormones. We do look at all the things we chatted about, neurotransmitters, environmental, even mold and things like that. And we come up with a comprehensive plan that gets to the root of what's going on. So hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, let us know. Put it in the comments. We'll see it there. And again, share with friends or family that could benefit too. We really want this information to be out so you can be empowered and you can be taking your health back. Anything else, Rob?
That's it. Thanks for having me again. And we should do this more often. I know we're trying to plan it. We got to get our schedules tied in together, but
let's do it.
Great.
Let's do it. Awesome. Let's go, brother. All right, guys, you have an awesome day. Take care, everyone. Bye now.